I'm Nikou, Asgari, the digital markets correspondent at the Financial Times. And I'm joined here by a wonderful panel where we will be looking at crypto's promise and progress and the reality of its march to mainstream utility in areas beyond finance, which I think will be very interesting. And to discuss this, I'm joined by Siddharth Coelho-Prabhu, Senior Director for Product at Coinbase Wallet, Leighton Cusack, founder of PleasrDAO, Jacob Horne, co-founder of Zora, and Ben Leventhal, founder and chief executive of Blackbird Labs. So thank you all very much for joining us. I guess the best place to start is a broad place to start. I mean, most of the panel sessions today have been about finance and payments and all that sort of thing, but this one is quite different, and the areas you work in are quite different, I think I'm fair in saying. Beyond finance, which industries, which areas do you think that blockchain is changing the most or could change the most, and why?
Great question. I mean, we have entrepreneurs here that are building those use cases, so I'm going to love to let them talk about it. But for me, I think it's consumer payments. And especially around this year, I think we're at this kickoff point where we now have the technology to send a digital dollar anywhere in the world for less than 1 cent and in under 2 seconds. And that has never existed before. And so we're already seeing, actually outside the US, we're seeing in emerging markets, massive spikes of adoption across all of the inflation countries, high inflation countries in the world. And that's something that, whether you're here in New York or you're in Texas or Tanzania, the ability to just take out your phone and send someone money instantly, that's really powerful. And I think that's the space that I'm watching.
Okay.
But lots more to come as well.
Yeah, I would say music. That's one I'm thinking about a lot right now. Music is an industry that was decimated by the internet. It's been terrible for artists. And so it's really interesting. What I'm thinking a lot about right now is how do you bring value back to musicians and bring value back to music using this new technology.
Mm-hmm. Jacob?
Yeah, my answer to that question is social media. So Zora is an on-chain social networking platform. And we basically use NFTs under the hood as the monetization layer for creators. So creators post on Zora, and an NFT gets created, and then we have around 500,000 collectors every month who will mint that content. So for creators, it's amazing just because they get to post like they would on any other social media network, but they're getting much more value capture than they've ever got on like YouTube or Instagram. So I think it's like quite a disruptive model to the advertising model that we see on social media, and it's a really simple and easy user experience that is growing quite quickly. So I think social media is the big one that we spend our time on.
Okay, great. And Ben?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we're excited about the restaurant industry, both for consumers and restaurants. We think there's a lot of value to unlock. I mean, I think the point about payments, of course, we certainly agree with, and I think it's incumbent upon builders like Blackbird and the rest of us to not only figure out how to get the money across, but also get it out on the other side. We have restaurant merchants who have margins of 4 or 5%. They need to pay for their food, they need to pay their rent, and so it's not only about getting it across, but getting it out on the other side at a price cheaper than they're getting now. And so, you kind of look at large industries like restaurants, $1 trillion in the US, and there's a real opportunity there to think about something at that scale, make a real difference.
I want to touch on something and come back to sort of Jacob and Leighton on this. The industries that you mentioned, like what's fundamentally wrong with them right now? Like taking a step back, why is blockchain needed or going to be used in your view to change what to me seems like a sort of perfectly, I'm not a creator, but it seems like a perfectly functioning as a consumer industry. Am I wrong?
Sorry, I had a hard time hearing the end of your question.
Sorry?
So I don't want to say if you were wrong or not, because I had a hard time hearing the end of your question.
I mean, I guess the music industry, as
Yeah.
you mentioned, for creators, for consumers, like what's wrong with it now that it needs blockchain to change it?
Well, I would say it's working amazingly well for consumers.
Okay.
Right? But since the internet came around, something changed, is that people don't pay for music anymore. Or they do pay for music, sort of. They pay Spotify.
Right.
And Spotify gives maybe a penny to a musician. And so the thing that happened with the internet is the digitization of music destroyed its value for consumers. Consumers no longer paid for it because there's no ownership, right? And with what crypto enables, what blockchain enables, is that you can actually bring ownership back to music. So you can actually start paying people for their creative output And you can have a token that represents ownership of that creative output. And that's something you couldn't really have in 2010s. And so it's much better for musicians if we can find a way to get back to, ironically, actually where we were in like the 20th century, where people actually paid for creative output and collected that and owned it. And we had this sort of weird period at the beginning of the internet where people stopped owning things. They just started like renting them from Netflix. Like if you cancel your Netflix subscription, all your movies are gone. You don't own any of those. And so now we're bringing ownership back into music using blockchain as rails for that.
And Jacob?
Yeah, so for the content creators and then I guess the artists that use Zora, they're typically kind of in this like middle range of having a few thousand followers to maybe tens of thousands. And they're not large enough where they actually earn that much from the very like valuable content that they're creating. So they like the following, they get a bunch of likes, which is cool, but that's not enough to like make a living off of. But when they post it on Zora, basically they will earn somewhere between like 10 to often like 25 times more than they will because they have a group of people who love their content so much that they want to collect it and own it. So they kind of want to, one, support the artist, and then they get this object back, which over time may or may not accrue value because it's more popular, basically. So for creators, it's a really easy pitch. It's like, hey, you can post on this platform for free. If people like it, you might get immediate amounts of like crypto showing up. If not, there's like an audience here that are going to interact kind of like they do anyway. And then on the collector side, which is a little bit more new and interesting because you can't collect content on Instagram or YouTube today, this is where kind of like crypto and the mainstream meet, where it's like creators having a real problem solved because they're now earning more than they ever have. And there's a new class of kind of like crypto people who want to like buy and sell and collect content the same way they're now buying and selling Bitcoin or Ethereum, which has been like a new and growing category over the past like 3 or 4 years now.
Okay, I'm with you. And Ben, the restaurant industry, what's wrong with it at the moment?
I mean, there's a lot right with the restaurant industry. I mean, we go out to dinner and these meals are as good as ever, I think, for the most part, and that's why restaurants are packed and why, by a lot of consumer side measures, things look good. The problem is that restaurant margins have gone basically closer to zero than ever before, and if you look at the decline of profit margins in restaurants over the last 20 years, it's rather shocking given how much restaurants have become right down the middle mainstream culture and entertainment. So from our perspective, what's wrong there is there's just sort of been an erosion of the connectivity between restaurants and their customers. And a lot of the margin erosion is due to the fact that really what restaurants are doing day in and day out is buying their customers back over and over again from a lot of technology middlemen, like credit cards and like reservations companies and POS companies and third-party CRMs, and so it's kind of a mess. And the technology stack is bloated, and it's raising prices for restaurants, the cost of doing business for restaurants massively. So fundamentally, what we're thinking about is reconnecting consumers and restaurants, and making sure that as a consumer, when you walk into the restaurant, you are empowered to tell the restaurant exactly who you are, and the restaurant can connect to you directly. I think it's remarkable the fact that if, as a consumer, you want to have the restaurant understand your dining history. Let's say I live in the West Village and I happen to go to the restaurants around me. If I want to walk into a restaurant and show the restaurant that I'm a local, I have no technology that allows me to do that. I could hand the restaurant a sheet of paper and say, here's the last 10 restaurants I've been to. But from a technology perspective, it doesn't exist. That functionality doesn't exist. So that's the problem, and I think it manifests itself in different ways for consumers and for restaurants. But fundamentally, that's where we're aiming, and we think that there's a lot of reasons why the blockchain's a solve there.
I'm with you. I mean, Sid, do you think that the average consumer, does it matter to them whether what they're using is on the blockchain, is on Web 2, the internet? Why does the fundamental technology matter for the consumer, or is that sort of a secondary thought almost?
I don't think the consumer should care or does care about whether something is on-chain, but I think on-chain does enable things that were not possible before, and so they're going to just get better experiences. They may not even understand what's powering those experiences, but they'll get better experiences. And so just as one example, a couple of weeks ago, we had, a Fortune reporter did an interview with the Coinbase employee, Jesse Pollack, and then put up the article. and it was behind a paywall. So a lot of our, our crypto fans couldn't read the article. They weren't regular subscribers, and so instead we just launched it as a mint on Zora actually, and people could just buy it without needing to buy a whole annual subscription to Fortune. They could just buy this, and all the revenue went to Fortune. Okay. And there was over 10,000 purchases, I think over $18,000 in direct revenue to them from one article. And so it just enabled, it wasn't the fact that people were using crypto, it's just you enabled this small micropayment to buy a piece of content. And whether you knew you were using the blockchain or not, you just got value out of reading that article. And so I think that's just like one example of how consumers will just get value without knowing they're using crypto.
What do you make of that, Leighton?
I agree. I don't have anything to add.
Pardon?
Sorry, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jacob, what do you make of that? I mean, does the blockchain actually matter for the consumer? How much thought do you put into that?
We don't really mention it at all. So like I think a lot of the growth we've seen over the past year is because we've tried to make it as easy to use as possible and remove all of the typical crypto friction that you will see. So creators can show up, enter an email and post, and then ETH will just start showing up in their account. And that took like a lot of time to remove that complexity, because before you had to like go buy ETH, you had to set up a wallet, and then you had to connect your wallet to Zora, and it's like, what does connect your wallet even mean? Like, I think a lot of the growth and the advancements that have happened in the space over the past year is because the technology isn't the primary thing that's being brought to the table. It's solving a problem that a particular person has. So obviously, like when people ask, like if they're curious and how it works, it's like that's when talking about the technology and comes into the picture, but it's not the selling point. Like blockchain isn't the selling point at all.
I guess that's partly correct, like disagree with me if you like, but it's partly because talking about the technology and the underpinning of it risks alienating the average person in the West Village going to the restaurant because they don't know what that is, they don't frankly probably care. So how do you engage with that vast majority of people who you want to engage with, right, but they don't understand the technology? Like, how important is that to you, and how do you go about doing that?
We don't think it matters at all. I mean, I think in the end, you have to build magical consumer experiences. Like that's how you get to the mainstream. That's how you get to widespread adoption. Is you create something magical where before there wasn't something magical. So that's what we're focused on. Every once in a while, you may incidentally discover that this is on chain, or we're using Base, or we're partnering with Coinbase or a different service for some of our infrastructure. But in the end, I think what we're going to come to, if we haven't already, is we're going to realize that talking about Blackbird being on Base is no different than saying that our website is on AWS. It just simply doesn't matter. Either it's a good consumer experience and it's magical and it's making the lives of our users better, or it's not.
Why do you think that these technologies, this transformation is yet to take off and go fully mainstream, as the title of this panel is, I think? What's stopping this?
Well, I mean, arguably, we're in the process of it taking off now. I mean, I think to some extent we're kind of in the weeds, and so it's somewhat hard to perceive what's happening. But I think it's about, and we were talking about this a little bit before, but it's just about us as builders and as the folks that are sort of designing and developing things, understanding what the milestones are and building towards them, and just understanding it's an incremental process. I mean, I think even in the last year, what we've gotten to in terms of being able to spin up user identities behind the scenes and have a user provisioning a wallet for a user in the Blackbird ecosystem, in the app environment, without the user perceiving that, that's something that has created real magic. The lack of friction there in spinning up a wallet. So there's a bunch of checkpoints there. I think we also talk about permissionless systems and things being on chain. So one of the things that Blackbird is putting on chain is consumers' anonymized sort of dining identities. So all of your check-ins exist as an anonymized identity on chain, on Base. So that's all well and good, but until we show the value of that being on chain, again, it's sort of, we appreciate the progress that is being made, but we have to understand what the sort of adoption milestones are and work towards them. And that's sort of the process.
Right, right. Sid, what do you make of that? What are the steps, the progress, the path to becoming mainstream?
Yeah, I think one piece of it is, in one way, crypto is mainstream, right? So as an investment, as an asset class,
Right.
I think 1 in 5 Americans now own crypto. And that's already creating something of an awareness and a curiosity around, hey, what are people building with this technology? I own the asset, but what are people building? And so it's getting people geared up to be curious about this space. And beyond that, I think we are at this moment where we're seeing cultural moments emerge, right? Like backstage, I just bought a piece of a Wu-Tang album. That's like a mainstream-friendly consumer name that people, I talked about the Fortune article. The technology has been hard to use for a while, but now it's getting easier and easier. I bought it, and we were just joking about how quick it was. I bought it in 3 seconds, just now backstage, just while having a conversation. We're getting to the point where the technology is getting a little bit easier. More name brand, consumer brands are getting interested in experimenting with the technology. We're seeing it being used in the restaurant industry. We're seeing mainstream artists come in. And so I think we're about at that takeoff point where it can take off. We're not there yet, but I predict that we are almost there.
Leighton, what do you make of that? What does the path look like to going mainstream?
I think if I knew the answer to that question, I would probably be much richer. But I think my guess is I think getting culture on chain, and I think that's maybe leads into like what Jacob might want to say, but most people I think still think of crypto as trading. It's like buying and selling. It's like buy Bitcoin, sell Bitcoin.
Right.
Like I think the world that a lot of us live in crypto is like you're building a consumer application that's using crypto underneath it. And so when it comes to that, then it's like, okay, what's a compelling consumer application? And so like with my work right now, we're building a way to own this album, this famous Wu-Tang album. So that's not intrinsically that's very different than like buying or selling crypto. So I think bringing culture basically is what I'm getting at. Bringing culture on chain, like these non-financial cultural things, I think is really important.
Just because you mentioned the Wu-Tang album, I want to ask about the lawsuit that you filed against Martin Shkreli this week. Can you talk to us about that? Because it strikes me that his actions, does that not undermine the whole point of sort of digital ownership and singular ownership?
Yeah, well, so a few things.
I want to give some context, actually, to the audience.
Yeah.
I can give some context, and correct me if I'm wrong. For people who don't know, PleasrDAO bought a one-of-a-kind Wu-Tang album, which he then played on Twitter Spaces, which you're arguing is a copyright infringement and infringement of your ownership. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, a few things just to clarify. I actually don't work for PleasrDAO, so I didn't file the lawsuit. And I'm obviously, as any lawyer would say, you can't comment on ongoing litigation. But yeah, with all those things said, I think the situation there is a very interesting. We obviously don't have time to dive super deep into it, but I think a very interesting case study on what does it mean to have ownership in the digital world, piracy versus paying for access, and obviously the Wu-Tang and their whole story of this album that they created to protest the piracy of music. And I can't really comment on the legal proceedings, but I do agree it's an interesting topic with a lot of angles to dig into.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We have some questions from the audience, including one that is asking, is true mass adoption when we stop talking about crypto and blockchain technology, when crypto becomes boring? You're nodding. Is that it? Is that the end goal?
I 100% agree. I think people should only be talking about the cool things that they can do, and the technology should disappear into the background. I don't think anyone talks about using the internet anymore. They're just doing what they're doing. They're ordering a car or a pizza. And I think that we're at the point where I think we can start to make that available. And the folks here that are building experiences, I've seen them. They hide the crypto. It's very much like it's the blockchain is enabling something new and innovative that was not possible before, but it's also not front and center, and it's not something you need to talk about in order to benefit from either owning a piece of art or being rewarded as a creator or making a payment that you just sent to someone in another part of the world and paid no fees for, which is something you can't do with any payment network today. But it just gets enabled, and frankly, like right now, for example, we have a feature that we've launched recently where you can send a US dollar coin, and you can just create a link on your phone. You can put it in WhatsApp or Telegram or Discord or Twitter, whatever your favorite social media is. You can just send it to someone, and they open it and they get a US dollar coin on the other end, and then they can cash it out wherever they are in the world. People don't even need to know that they're using crypto. All they know is like, I needed to pay a vendor, or I needed to send money to my family in India, or something like that, and they just see a little message in WhatsApp that says, hey, here's your money. We're getting to where we're enabling those experiences, and it's not about crypto anymore.
Jacob, what do you make of that?
Yeah.
Is the end goal to be boring?
Yeah, we kind of had this saying at Zora, which is like everyone will eventually be a crypto person in the same way that everyone right now is an internet person or a computer person. Like, it's kind of an absurd way to present it, and that, it'll be breakout success when it feels mundane and just a part of your everyday life. And it'll only really be a part of your everyday life if it's solving a fundamental problem or is like fun, easy, entertaining to use. And I think the reason we aren't there yet is because it just is really that early. Like, one of the really large technical breakthroughs of the past year was scaling, going from what are called layer ones, or like kind of Ethereum, to now layer twos. So the transaction costs of like doing things on chain went from tens or hundreds of dollars to do a single action to now like fractions of a cent. So for us, that was a huge deal because it used to cost creators $100 to put their like video on chain or their image on chain, which if you're trying to pitch a product that's going to cost them money to do something, it's totally insane. But then once we moved and had this kind of technological breakthrough as a space, and you can basically abstract that cost away completely and make it free, and then you get the benefits of the technology, the experience fundamentally changes. It feels much more magical, and then a whole new world opens up. And I think we're only just now at a year of that existing. So like, I think we've seen a lot of growth, and it's very early, but now there's this whole new kind of open space for what's possible to build because of that change. But we're only a year in. Like, the crypto industry is obviously over a decade old now, but in terms of consumer applications, it's like year one, quite literally. So that's why I think like it's growing, but it's still very early.
You mentioned putting images on chain, and also going back to what you were saying earlier about culture, and culture moving onto the blockchain is where this will take off. I guess the biggest example of culture moving onto the blockchain was the rise of NFTs, right? The rise and then very rapid collapse in their values. What have you, or you think the industry has learned from that, Jacob?
Yeah, great question. So I think like the 2021 mania was basically like, what happened was there was kind of this collective realization that if you put media on chain, there is value there. And then I think the mania part was that like it was way too overvalued, and then the things that were kind of being bought and sold and traded looked and felt kind of like trading cards. So it was like, I think that was like the mental model that people were coming to the table with. But then what came out of that was like, well, instead of just putting like monkey pictures on chain, what if we start putting like all forms of content on chain? So it could be like news articles, YouTube videos, IG posts, photography, like you name it, we see all of that. And although they're not seeing, headline millions of dollars of sales, they're generating hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars in revenue for these creators. And that's like really powerful, because it's like, obviously, like we create a lot of valuable content on social media every day, but we don't capture any of that value from it. This kind of inverts it, and now the creators take ownership of it. So what we're seeing is like, it's mostly like the majority of our users are under the age of 25. We see a lot of kind of like, they are like, they skew creative. So it's like a lot of like fashion designers like posting sketches, creating digital art still. But I think like one of the more interesting pockets has just been like literally posting like what you would consider social media content on chain, and there is a lot of value there that's showing itself up. So I think that's like one of the big learnings from 2021 to now, which is evolving from like collectibles focus to content. And I think that's a really big shift, and that's a lot easier for people to grok, and I think resonates a lot more because we like create and engage with content every day, so it feels right at home.
Ben, what do you make of that? What did you make of the rise and the collapse of NFTs and where?
Well, I think it allows
now?
us to build now eyes wide open. I think we kind of understand maybe some of the pitfalls of getting a little too excited too soon. Mm-hmm. And I think we're all building things that take a longer view and that are a lot more substantive. And so I think, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, which is where we are now.
Right, yes, an optimistic view. We've got time for a few more audience questions. As the technology progresses, how might consumers interact with crypto without even realizing it, for example, in the background of existing apps? Sid, do you have a particular view on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we've heard a couple of times, and anyone who's used an on-chain app over the last 5 years, right, like a dApp, on-chain app, you wanted to buy an NFT, you have an entrepreneur that's going to launch a product, and then the first thing they do when a user shows up is they say, hey, go install a separate wallet app. And that's like a really painful experience because you've got to go install a separate app to use the first app. Then you've got to save this recovery phrase and write it down. Then you've got to go to an exchange, which is the third entity, and you've got to buy crypto, put it in your wallet. Then finally you can come back to the original app that you wanted to use, something that Ben built or Jacob built. And then you have to pay something called a gas fee, which is like, and you pay like $5, $10, $15 to use this app, and no one knows what a gas fee is, so they've got to learn that concept. And now we're finally at the point where with fast scalable blockchains and with brand new wallet technology that we've shipped, and I'd love to do a demo actually if we can pull it up. We've taken that process that used to be, for the last 5 or 6 years, it used to be anywhere from like 5 to 15 minutes, 50 clicks, and now it's as simple as like something you can do in 30 seconds. So I'll just show you this demo. In this case, like I'm on some website, like let's say it's a new mint, and
I think they're trying to show something.
yeah, so I'm on this website, it's a new app I want to check out. I hit the mint button, I don't have a wallet, I click create one, I use my Face ID, I create it right there in like 2 seconds. Boom, I have a wallet now, and now I'm back in the website, I hit mint. Gas is so cheap now that the developer just chose to pay for it. I use Face ID to sign the transaction, and that's it, I'm done. That's my wallet, that's my NFT sitting in my wallet. This entire video, this demo, 30 seconds. And there's a QR code after this, you can try it yourself. This is the leapfrog next generation wallet technology that we just launched last week. And what this means is that that whole painful experience is gone, and you can go on-chain and use the app that someone's built in literally 30 seconds. And I think that's a big piece of enabling the next billion users to come on-chain. It's just making all this stuff disappear and be really easy.
But Ben, what do you make of that? The question was asking about at what stage users will be using crypto without even realizing it, interacting with it in the background.
I mean, that's our job,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's the whole point. And I think it's very exciting where the progress we're making. And I think what's exciting is I think we're starting to sort of agree as an industry, as builders, what's our job versus what's the consumer's job? Where is the sort of infrastructure product line? And I think we're making, as an industry now, really good choices, and this is a great example. I mean, it's a humongous step forward, where we can be kind of actually reasonable in terms of what we're asking consumers to do, in terms of our expectations of consumers. That's where the future is, and that's where the real excitement is. And I think we now have the infrastructure tools to be reasonable in that way. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is what it looks like for sure.
In terms of looking at the present to the future, some geographies, some countries are further ahead in terms of crypto usage, understanding of blockchain than others. Are there specific areas that you think are particularly exciting or particularly sort of way behind? Let's start with you, Ben.
Geographically?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously the regulatory environment in the U.S. right now leaves something to be desired, but hopefully we'll get better. I mean, we're building in the U.S., so our sort of we are excited about places where there's huge populations of great restaurants. So for us, for better or for worse, we're building primarily in the U.S. right now, but we'll build all around the world where there's great restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Jacob, what do you make of that geographically?
Well, the majority of our users are actually in the U.S. And then we have, I guess, like the next largest regions for us are the UK, Latin America. We actually have like a really strong contingent. And then, yeah, kind of across the EU. So, yeah, to speak to Zora specifically, like, yeah, we're kind of mostly focused on the US. That's the market that we're most focused on, and that's where a lot of like high-quality content and creators are. And they also have a propensity to pay for content and want to support creators as well. So, I'm sure that's very different based on use case. Like payments, I'm sure the makeup looks very different geographically compared to what we're doing, but that's at least what we see.
Leighton, same question.
Well, I don't necessarily know if I could speak to it with what I'm working on right now, but the previous company, which was more in the DeFi space, we did see the majority of our usage was outside the United States, which was really interesting. It's in areas where there's not as well-established financial infrastructure, so like Southeast Asia, South America, like Philippines were really big. Argentina was huge. So I don't know. Right now, it's just wherever the Wu-Tang fans are.
Sid?
I think there's different use cases of different segments. So I think for on-chain culture, I think today it's very Western dominated. And that's because you have more disposable income here. A lot of the early adopters are here. I think that's going to change. I think what's going to happen is, my prediction at least is, as creators realize that anywhere in the world realize they can put up new content and contribute to the culture and get rewarded immediately. People are tipping them in crypto, they're buying their things. Suddenly you're going to see all across emerging markets as well that this is the fastest way to create an income for yourself, is to start to contribute to culture on-chain and start to see that. So I think that will change. And then with payments, definitely, I think emerging markets, I think Chainalysis did a study of like where's crypto adoption taking off the most. And it's countries like Nigeria, Argentina, Venezuela, Turkey, Southeast Asia, anywhere that people are looking for more economic freedom, that they need better financial services. We're seeing huge adoption there, and stablecoins are growing like wildfire there as well. And so we try and work with both of those different segments to see what we can do to help grow both of those.
A globally optimistic note, I think, to end on. We are running out of time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to my panel.